the greatest white-collar crime story in the history of Australia. There's unbridled ambition of young men involved in an illegal enterprise.
I'm going to take you live now to Canberra following the arrest of 2 men on charges of insider trading.
It wasn't just your typical vanilla insider trading investigation. This involved the corruption of a Commonwealth Government employee.
Today in Melbourne and Canberra, the AFP and ASIC executed 8 warrants.
You see movies like The Wolf of Wall Street, but to actually see it play out in front of you, I'm going to remember it for a while.
It's a story about 2 young men, Chris and Lukas, who do something reckless and illegal, and at its heart, it's a human story about greed and almost Shakespearean deception.
Do I still count Lukas as a friend? I mean, well, the day I left prison was the last time I saw him. So probably not.
Just before dawn, 9th of May 2014, authorities bang on the door at a flat in Canberra.
I thought there'd been a mistake. They'd gotten the wrong house. I was 24, and up until that point in my life, I'd never had any interaction with the law before. The AFP officer in charge got me to read through the search warrant. As soon as I saw, my name and Lukas's name, it was right at that point that I knew exactly what it was about.
Operation Leith was the code name that we gave for the insider trading investigation, which involved Lukas Kamay and his university friend, Christopher Hill.
Chris's access to price-sensitive government information was essential to Lukas's plan to enrich himself.
In this case, he saw an easy option with Christopher Hill.
Chris Hill, or Christopher Hill, he's a bit of an everyman. He was a very sort of smart young guy, effortlessly smart was how his friends described him.
I spent most of my childhood growing up in Don Vale, in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne. I was very academic at primary school, which carried on through to high school.
Chris, he just sort of had a gift. Doesn't really need to take a note or try all that hard. It just sort of comes to him. Quite frustrating for everyone else, but he's very capable and very competent.
Growing up, I always wanted to get into the corporate finance sort of world. Something in banking, something with money, numbers, maths, just made really logical sense to me. It was very structured, and that's kind of the way my brain's wired, and which is why I enjoyed it.
Chris and Lukas meet at Monash University straight out of school when they're both doing the same degree, commerce and economics.
He was a different breed to me in the sense that he was so super driven and ambitious to the point where he just had to succeed.
Chris probably had a bit too much fun and quickly realised that his marks weren't going to be good enough to win a place at one of the sort of top financial houses in the country. And so he ended up taking the government job with the Australian Bureau of Statistics, or the ABS as it's known. It's a massively important government agency.
After 2 to 3 years, I was promoted to a position where I was, one of the people in charge of the labour force statistics in particular. Everything, including employment rate, unemployment rate, the biggest economic indicators for the country.
I think in the beginning we all thought he was, killing it, having a great time. And then after a while, he started to get over the job a little bit.
He was stuck in a rut and he wasn't necessarily looking for something else or looking for some excitement in his life, but when it came along, he was certainly happy to embrace it. Two years after Chris and Lukas had left university, a group of friends came together down on the Mornington Peninsula, you know, a reunion, if you like, for the weekend.
I was just chatting with someone about, you know, that I just got a promotion and was now doing the labour force figures. I remember Lukas was there talking to someone else and he sort of spun around and said, oh, you know, I can use those to make money or something. Like it was just a, you know, a massive throwaway comment at the time. And that was the end of it. It was nothing more than that.
That's really what kicked it off, from my understanding, is that it's just this one throwaway line where Lukas says to Chris, wow, you know, I could use those numbers.
I met Lukas a couple of times over at Chris's house.
You're supposed to be directing it, not taking photos of me.
Lukas was a very charismatic, enthusiastic guy. He seemed, you know, that he'd done quite well for himself. You know, he was obviously come from, you know, a good family. He's come from a bit of money, a bit of wealth.
I think for Chris, Lukas represented success. He had achieved a job that I think most people doing a commerce degree at that time in that place would have sought after, working for a large international investment bank, Goldman Sachs.
Very shortly after, he gets a job with National Australia Bank and he is promoted fairly quickly through the ranks of NAB, and as a sort of 25 or 26-year-old, he's earning $200,000 a year. He's driving a BMW Roadster. You know, he is a guy that is doing pretty well.
About a couple of months after the party, Lukas called me and we had a fairly brief chat about exactly what information I had access to at the ABS, and also the fact that using that information, we could be very profitable, you know, through trading on the markets. We caught up in Melbourne at a pub, and it was there that we discussed how I was going to get the information to him. We decided that we'd have mobile phones that were registered in other people's names. There wasn't a lot of thought put into the burner phones. One of us must have just sort of had it in the back of our minds from, I don't know, from TV or movies or just general, I don't know.
How this scheme worked was that Chris would access the data from his ABS computer. He'd write it on a piece of paper, he'd put it in his pocket, he'd take it out of the building. He would ring Lukas on his burner phone, and then basically, as the sort of foreign exchange market works, it's all around expectations. So if the data was stronger than expected, the Australian dollar would typically go up in that case. And so Lukas would buy the Australian dollar, and when it went up, he would sell it after that, and that's when he'd make a profit.
So the plan was to hit a balance of $200,000 in Lukas's account. He would then pay tax on it, leaving us with $100,000 to be split in two, or $50,000 each.
On September 12, 2013, Lukas and Chris make their first trade. About 30 seconds before the labour force figures were released at 11:30 a.m. on that day, Lukas goes and buys some contracts, and then about sort of 26 seconds later, he sells those contracts after the labour force figures have been released, and he makes a profit of $13,500.
It was like that feeling of, okay, we've done it, we've achieved it. And yeah, there was, you know, it was a good feeling.
Did you have any nagging doubts about what you guys were doing?
Yeah, so very initially, but after the first time, you know, when I gave him the second number and then the third and the fourth, like, it just, I started not really thinking twice about it. You know, when you make a decision over and over again with no negative consequences, you stop thinking about what you're doing, really.
What Lukas didn't tell Chris was that he'd opened a second secret account, and Lukas, in his secret account, he'd made $7,700. When you think about what Lukas did, basically at the first available opportunity, he betrayed Chris. And it was very clear from that point on that he wasn't going to stop at $200,000. Gradually, as the months went on, his trades got bigger and bigger. So he's putting down more money, and by the time we get up to Christmas at that year, you know, he's setting off red flags everywhere.
Lukas Kamay very quickly became one of the biggest traders in Australia at the time. He definitely would have been in the top 3 of Pepperstone clients overall for volume. Pepperstone is a foreign exchange and derivatives broker that Lukas traded with. I was on the licence as a responsible manager at Pepperstone Group, so anything compliance related was definitely going to fall to me.
The first thing that sort of caught Joel's eye, if you like, was the fact that Lukas was winning all the time. You know, over the first few months, he won 21 times in a row.
Traders in our space, if they're above 50%, if they're above 55%, they're doing a really good job. I remember the moment when the red flags first went off. I looked at 3 of the trades in a row and then just saw the fact that it was statistical data in each one. And then we could clearly see the pattern was the ABS.
Joel looked through Lukas's friends on Facebook, and one of those worked in Canberra. And so he looked up that person, whose name was Christopher Hill.
And lo and behold, the first line of search had a Christopher Hill and the ABS. I started to laugh. Right then and there, I knew we had him.
Joel picks up the phone to call ASIC.
It's Joel Murphy here from Pepperstone.
The Australian Securities and Investments Commission.
Have I come through to the right person to report this?
The complaint from Joel Murphy at Pepperstone was very compelling. To have that connection given to us gave us a head start on the investigation. And this case was escalated almost immediately.
What we know from ASIC is that it's actually really difficult to catch people who are committing insider trading. So ASIC very quickly made a decision to bring in the AFP.
This case was a first for the AFP. We'd never undertaken a joint investigation with ASIC before, and not one of this magnitude.
There was a sense of urgency for the investigation because it involved a possible corrupt Commonwealth official, so that's a high priority for the AFP.
By November 2013, Lukas's trading just got totally out of control. By January, his profits had climbed above $270,000, and then by February, just the month after, they were at $1.96 million. And the key thing is that he wasn't telling Chris about it. So Chris still thought they were continuing along with this very methodical plan of gradually making $200,000 in profits, whereas Lukas had gone totally off the reservation by this point. The AFP really brought a sort of organised crime focus to this investigation. So they had bugs installed in Lukas's car, they had bugs in his house.
We obviously suspected Chris was passing on information, but we had no evidence to substantiate it. Both Chris and Lucas were being very disciplined. They weren't contacting each other on their regular phones. They weren't meeting up in person. So as time went on, we started to doubt ourselves. And then they just reached a point where you went, is he just lucky?
It was quite frustrating, to be honest, in terms of not being able to, really hone in on how that information sharing was occurring.
On the 13th of March 2014 at 11:10 a.m, police surveillance cameras within the NAB office captured Lucas taking his desk phone off the hook. He left his workstation and the cameras picked him up heading to the men's toilet. Over the next 25 minutes from a toilet cubicle at NAB, Lucas would make a giant trade that would essentially allow him to turn about $1 million into $2.5 million. That massive trade that Lucas made pushed his profits, his secret profits, above $6 million. That was 30 times more than he'd agreed to with Chris.
I'm a huge fan of the TV show The Block, and I remember one of the criminal investigators informed me that Lukas Kamay had been showing interest in purchasing one of the apartments.
What about the super case? Wow.
Wow.
And then you girls sit down and you're going to take the lead.
So we held a night at the Block in our apartment for all of the people that were interested in buying it. And Lucas, I guess, stood out to us because he was very young. I remember thinking, oh, Daddy and Mummy are buying you an apartment. You're not old enough to buy yourself a multi-million-dollar apartment. Yeah, he struck me as this young person that, I guess, wanted his 5 minutes of fame.
At 1-2, I took it from this gentleman, take $2,050,000 now.
So on the night of the auction, he ended up bidding the highest, which was $2.375 million.
It is sold, thank you very much.
When I was watching The Block that night, it was a little bit surreal. Yeah, it did appear that Lucas was taunting law enforcement. He was very confident that he wasn't going to get caught.
For an organisation that goes after mafia bosses and drug kingpins and things like that, it was a huge sort of deflating moment, I think, that they couldn't catch a couple of private schoolboys who were complete amateurs. Finally, when they thought all was lost, really, that they were never going to catch these guys, they caught a break in the investigation. It was the Anzac Day long weekend in 2014 and Chris had come down from Canberra to Melbourne. He planned to meet up with Lucas, but the big problem was that he'd forgotten his burner phone. So he had to contact Lucas on his regular phone. And that really was the first time that the AFP had actual recorded communication between Chris and Lucas.
I'll just give you drips and drabs, $5 grand, $5 grand, 10 grand, and I'll just load you all the way up.
I was highly surprised that contact had occurred. It was the beginning of the end. On that weekend, Lucas picks Chris up from his mate's place that he's staying at. While sitting in the car, Lucas provides Christopher with $6,500. And they sit there and have a conversation around what they have been up to and what they plan to do for the next couple of months.
No one knows I'm doing this. I haven't told anyone at work. Not even my girlfriend knows about it. Not even my brother knows about it.
The conversation was actually quite amazing, and I just couldn't believe that, we'd actually got that golden nugget that you'd always kind of hope for in an investigation.
When you buy an investment property...
It was quite exciting because it was the first contact that we had between the two.
It's not like it's drug money.
Everything that we'd suspected but couldn't prove was now starting to come our way.
And be mindful, I have the money in my bank account. I can earn interest on it. So I'm going to give you more than 50%. Have you kept it like that as well? You spend the money and your friends are like, what the f is all this money?
No, I kept it in my room. Put cash in my wallet when I go out. That's it.
You know, I was excited to say the least. It was a game changer. It was a pivotal point in the investigation.
The 9th of May 2014, authorities finally got the chance to go and kick in some doors with dawn raids in both Canberra and Melbourne.
I started searching through Lucas's drawers. It just struck me that everything was so neat. I looked up and saw that there was a window open above Lucas's bed. And the sergeant who was in the room with me, he jumped on the bed and stuck his head out the window, and I said, "There's a phone down on the ground down here."
Sitting there is the crucial piece of evidence they're looking for, the burner phone. Lucas had heard the knock on the door and that he'd thrown the phone out the window. Problem was, it wasn't a very good throw and it didn't go very far.
I do remember seeing Lucas when I entered the premises. It stood out in my memory because he seemed very calm, like almost unconcerned, wasn't upset, wasn't showing to me any signs of distress. Most people just realise, I'm being caught, I'm in trouble, and they fall to pieces. But he kept it together. It was then my job to go in and tell Lucas that we've restrained all his bank accounts and then also 2 properties which he owned and a BMW motor vehicle. It's the first time we've actually just seen him drop his head and show some type of, concern or realisation that reality's hit and that we've taken it away from you. Well, that's where it hits the hardest.
Any comment? Is it true you're part of a conspiracy, Kamay?
The betrayal of Lucas to his friend Chris was quite extraordinary.
Whose idea was it?
We expected to see an equal profit sharing arrangement. But it was during the record of interview that Chris found out about the $7 million. I don't think he actually believed us.
Yeah, I just thought they were trying to trick me. I had no idea that he had opened another account and had also traded in that other account for himself. When I found out just how much money had been made, then, initially I was pretty pissed off because it just seemed so obvious to me that it was such a stupid amount of money that there's no way it wouldn't have gone undetected. My barrister, he just said flat out, it'll definitely be going to prison. It was a pretty full-on moment.
At the end of 2014 in the Victorian Supreme Court, both Lucas and Chris ended up pleading guilty to insider trading. Lucas took the stand, which was very unusual for someone pleading guilty, and he essentially blamed it on Chris.
When it came to the question about how this all began, Lucas said that Chris had approached him.
The judge was very scathing, and ultimately she came down on the determination that it was Lucas who came up with the scam.
The DPP is right to describe your conduct, Mr. Kamay, as the worst instance of insider trading to have come before the courts in this country.
Lucas was sentenced to 7 years and 3 months jail with a non-parole period of 4 years and 6 months. Now, that was the longest sentence for insider trading in Australian history. When it came to Chris, he got a lesser sentence.
Christopher Russell Hill, your total effective sentence is 3 years and 3 months imprisonment. Remove the prisoners, please.
Family and friends, I think they were obviously a bit shocked at the length. You know, I think I was probably the only one who'd really kind of already accepted it.
His dad let out this guttural cry, really. For his parents, who are just very good people, you never wanted to see them like that, really. It was really hard.
I'm a professor at the University of Sydney Business School, and my research is focused on white-collar crime and corporate governance. When I first met Chris, it was really in the context of an interview where we were getting him to reflect on the sorts of justifications and rationalizations that he was thinking through during his offending. The thing that struck me most about him was that he owned what he had done. It's hard to explain why Chris got involved. The amount in the scheme of things wasn't going to be life-changing, and the risks were substantial. The consequences were extreme.
I knew in the back of my mind that it's something I shouldn't be doing. But then I guess I kind of convinced myself that there was really no victim. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't coming directly out of someone's pocket or wallet or house.
Insider trading is definitely not a victimless crime. When you've got someone who is winning and making significant gains, there's always going to be someone that's on the losing side to that. And typically in these cases, it's going to be a global spanning bank or financial institution that backs the foreign exchange market. And they're owned by shareholders, including your average mum and dad investor via their superannuation.
Are you or were you sort of ashamed of what you did?
I'm not going to say that I'm ashamed of what I did. I guess I'm disappointed to some extent. I definitely take full responsibility for, you know, for everything I've done. And I think that's why, you know, a lot of people found it so hard to accept why I was, you know, not so angry at Lukas. I was a willing participant and a willing participant over and over and over again.
After 2 years in prison, Chris was released from Beechworth, and he talks about it as quite an emotional time, really.
My parents were waiting to pick me up. And yeah, that was, you know, just such a good car ride home. I started applying for jobs, and I probably went through about 20 or 30 applications, but I just didn't hear back from a single one. Yeah, that was pretty hard because I'd gone from, you know, I've come out, this is great, back to kind of, and now I can't get work.
Lukas got out of prison in 2019 after serving 4.5 years of his sentence. I spoke to a number of Lukas's friends during the podcast. I think he's a fascinating character. I don't think he's the sort of bogeyman that he's betrayed in some senses. I think there's a lot of, you know, good in Lukas as well. He made a really terrible mistake very early in his life, and I think that, you know, he's paid a really huge price for that. I've heard that he'd done an MBA while he was inside, and that he had become an advocate for prisoners' rights and helped people make good decisions when faced with lucrative temptations. Towards the end of the podcast, I got a call from Joel, the guy that was the compliance officer at Pepperstone, who ultimately tipped off the police. And he'd wanted to meet up with Chris. And he felt quite affected by Chris's story.
If I can do something that benefits other people who may be in the same sort of position as I was in, and if we can make them think twice about what they're about to do.
I started to get a bit of a tinge of guilt because my involvement might have added some prison time to both their sentences, and that sort of really weighed on me. I really just wanted to have a beer with Chris and see things from the other side of the fence.
Yeah, Joel and I met up in Melbourne earlier this year, and he mentioned that he had a couple of positions and asked if I would be interested.
I know that when he got his job, he was over the moon just to be working again. It's sort of a way that you feel like a member of society.
So you know all the work that we've been doing?
Yeah.
You don't know half of it until you go through the process.
I'm really enjoying the position, really enjoying the people, the new challenges. And yeah, I'm just, thankful for the opportunity. Looking forward to what's coming next.
Christopher is a risk analyst, so if there was any insider trading, he's probably going to be the one that would uncover it. The job that he's in is ironic, but he's definitely learned his lesson and he doesn't want to go back and repeat the early 20s of his life again. I think he just wants to move forward, work hard, build his career and build his life. Yes, I do trust Christopher Hill completely.